Welcome, and thanks for joining this session. I'm Jennifer Lang, VP of Customer Experience, Trends, Consumer Insights at TD Bank, and I'll be facilitating our conversation. Today, we've got an exciting fireside chat with Paul Adams, Senior Director at JD Power, on the results from their new financial health and advice study, which is actually being released this week. And so it's literally hot off the press, and it is being released in both Canada and the US. And so today we'll talk with Paul about the results from the study for about 15 minutes, and then we'll have a bit of time for Q&A at the end. A little bit of context as we jump into this session. I think that we've all seen and read about the impact that the pandemic has had and the impact that's been disproportionate to specific groups and communities, and how the pandemic has amplified and widened existing inequities. And so as we shift our focus on our collective economic recovery, we can simply not succeed or thrive if large parts of our population continue to struggle financially. And the effects of financial insecurity go so far beyond finances to health outcomes, social and community cohesion, and so much more. And so our discussion today will focus on what JD Power's new study is telling us about the state of financial health in both the US and Canada, what drives satisfaction with one's own financial situation, and ultimately what financial institutions can do to improve financial health outcomes for consumers and customers. And so with that, let's jump right into the conversation. Firstly, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
Thank you. The JD Power Financial Health and Advice Study is literally just being released in both Canada and the US. So why don't we start with a little bit of the basics? Can you tell us a bit about what does this study measure, and really what was the impetus for launching this study?
Sure. Well, the impetus is we do measure the voice of the customer. We work with companies around the globe, and we bring this information to them so they can become tactically better at a range of things, answering the phone, branch service, app performance, all of these sort of tactical things. But raising it up a level, we want to help our clients do a better job not only of serving customers, but at attracting more of them and expanding relationships. We want customers to have good relationships with their banks, because we look at this from the customer side as well. I mean, we view ourselves as representing the voice of the customer and kind of being the voice of the customer when we're meeting with our clients. So this particular topic is a win-win, because it's just good for both the customer and the financial institution, because we absolutely see and we absolutely believe that providing advice and providing guidance around helping consumers improve their financial literacy and their financial wellness are absolutely winning strategies. And we firmly believe, and we think people will see this in the study results, there are banks that are differentiating. There are banks that are ahead of the market. And so we want to measure this to understand what's happening so that all boats can rise and financial institutions can do a better job for their customers. Now, what we've done specifically is we have went at this from a very retail mass market standpoint. We're focusing on the retail bank and the credit card provider. I mean, these are, for many consumers, these are the two primary financial institutions they deal with. So we're going deep into those relationships to find out what customers think about the financial health support they're receiving, and also information to help customers improve their literacy, so that we can understand and quantify what matters. It all kind of matters, but what matters most in terms of improving satisfaction and advocacy, and really empowering customers to do better for themselves. So we're measuring this in US and Canada, looking at the retail banking and credit card sides of the relationships, and we're doing it in kind of a big annual syndicated study along with a monthly tracker. So we're in the field every month gathering information and feeding it back to clients in these two countries.
Nice. So what would you say are some of the high-level findings that you would share from both markets, perhaps?
Yeah, I think we see, I mentioned it before, folks. I think everybody believes, rightfully so, that these things matter. We're quantifying it. And we're quantifying this by specific types of advice and guidance. So we are seeing that financially healthy habits absolutely go hand in hand with customers feeling empowered to improve their financial situations. And some of these are pretty broadly used, like direct deposit, and things like keeping a budget and tracking expenses and monitoring one's credit score, or setting up a savings plan automatic, right? So that it happens by itself. We know for certain that these financially healthy habits help customers feel more empowered, and it does feel these financially healthy habits correlate very strongly with financial health of customers. So we know that, but we also see direct evidence of certain types of services that are being provided by financial institutions that, again, move the needle more than others. Things like helping me I mentioned this earlier, helping me establish a budget, offering me money management education, helping me put limits on my spending so that I don't overspend, and using these insights to provide me guidance on how to spend better and save better. So, we've really quantified the satisfaction impacts that can be gained overall through these types of actions, as well as by customer segment, because we see for the healthy customer versus the vulnerable, they do have differing levels of impact.
I think the study highlights there's 6 really financial healthy habits that consumers can do that have that strong correlation. And so we know very tangibly now, quantitatively, that these actually matter. If we could get customers to do these behaviors, we know it will help the outcomes. There was a stat in the study that actually talked about the fact that consumers were a little bit split as to whether or not FIs had an obligation to help them manage their personal financial situation. I was surprised by this, and so they were a bit split. Some said, yes, there's an obligation. Others said, no. What were your thoughts on that finding, and what do you think's behind that?
So to be honest, we were just curious with this particular question, because we wondered, well, how many customers out there. Yeah, we can track how many customers use these services, but how many customers out there really feel that this should be part of the bank's value proposition? And you know what? It's only a third. It's not that high. And the way it broke out was pretty interesting, because about a third of customers said that they feel their financial institution does have an obligation to help them with these things. Then a third were in the middle, kind of indifferent or neutral. And then a third said, no, got it. I'll do it on my own. Don't need them. We're okay. What was really interesting, though, is the customers who felt this higher level of obligation did have certain characteristics. So they were, statistically, with a third and a third and a third, there's a lot of customers everywhere. But statistically, this group that felt the bank had an obligation, they were younger, they tended to be more male, they tended to have higher incomes. From an ethnicity standpoint, they tended to be Black, Hispanic, or Asian rather than Caucasian. They tended to be more urban. They tended to live urban rather than in rural areas. So, there are some patterns that suggest that this group of customers who feel that their banks are obligated to help with these services, they really are the more sophisticated consumers. These customers who, when we looked at it more deeply, these customers who felt their financial institution was obligated, strong word, were also the most engaged, and they used the most services. So they feel the financial institution is obligated, and with their behaviors, I think we can all reach the conclusion that they really want these services, and if they're not getting them, it's not a good thing. Or if they're taken away or scaled back in some way, that would be a real negative for these folks.
And so it was such an interesting finding for me as well as I reflected. And based on what you just said, it's folks who maybe have already taken advantage of some of those services. They come to expect it, and they are more engaged because they understand that there is a benefit to them. But there's a whole other portion of the populations that either don't understand that there is a benefit, perhaps lack trust that we have their best interest at heart, which I think is something that we can change that. And so there's probably a few factors on why maybe 2/3 aren't quite sure if the banks are obligated to help them.
Yeah, no, you're right, and you know, the third, you know, feel that the bank is obligated matches pretty closely with the percentage of customers who say they're highly interested in obtaining this type of help or guidance from their bank. You know, it's less than a third of them who say they're highly interested. So it just tells us once again that there is a lot of white space here, because that there is a, you know, nearly a majority of consumers are sort of in that middle space of indifference, and you know, depending upon the need, depending upon how it's presented, they can be, you know, they can be brought over, and we can cultivate interest in these services, is what the data is telling us as well.
Absolutely. And how do we grow that belief that it's a partnership, that the financial institutions can partner with them to help them get to better outcomes, I think is the challenge that we should all take on, without a doubt. So let's talk about that. In the study, you know, you talk about specific actions that FIs can take to help improve and support customer financial health. Can you talk to us about what some of those actions were?
Sure. And just to back up on the question a moment, it was interesting. A year plus, we did a bunch of focus groups. When you could still do in-person focus groups, we did some early on in 2020 as we were shaping this study, and it was so interesting because when we asked people, well, what do you think about your bank and this idea of them helping you improve your wellness, improve your financial health, and you know what the very first thing we generally heard? Tell me how to avoid fees, right? And so there is no one-size-fits-all solution. This has to be focused on a customer segment level, because what will work for the vulnerable customer, it's a different set of things for these customers who feel financially healthy, and I think everybody knows this. But you know, for those vulnerable customers, it's back to the help me set up a budget, help me understand how to avoid fees, whereas I think we could all imagine for the wealthier customers, you know, they're looking for retirement and investment-oriented advice. But you know what's also interesting? They're also looking for those same things. Help me budget. Help me figure out how to better kind of manage my expenses and know when to spend and when I should hold off. But you know what? They're in a different place. So for them, it's more about, okay, I'm going to pay down debt, or I'm going to accumulate some savings. I'm going to do. Whereas the other side of the population is more about, oh my gosh, you know, the rent is due, and it's a whole, you know. But another, since I have the floor for just another minute before the next question, something that banks in the U.S. in particular need to focus on, like now, is this child tax credit. It's coming out soon, like this summer, as part of the American Rescue Act. It's estimated that 36 million American households are going to receive these. Peter Tufano, an expert we've been working with on this topic, estimates that there is going to be cumulatively, not all at once, but cumulatively, $115 billion coming into customers' accounts through this pandemic relief program. And customers have questions. Not everybody knows about this stuff. And, you know, the IRS just put up a portal where customers can go to find out their eligibility and all that. I looked at it. Looks like something the IRS would do. But customers need to know about this. There may also be some tax implications for some people. So this is just, I mean, treat it like PPP. You know, what we saw with the pandemic last spring and with PPP and small business banking, customer satisfaction scores surged. They absolutely shot up big time because customers saw banks responding, both in retail and small business banking, And so this is another one of those, right? There's a big thing happening impacting 36 million families in America. That's a lot. So if you're not already on this, please check it out. This is something that will help you move the needle, in the near term without even buying our study. So there you go.
There's a tip. And I do think you're absolutely right. How do we help people understand that it's available? How do we help them access it? But how do we make sure we don't stop there? Because there are considerations and advice they need about, you can tap into this relief. What are the considerations? What are the implications? In Canada, the same thing happened during tax time. They didn't take tax off of the relief payments. And when tax season came around, a lot of Canadians had to pay back a lot of tax. And so really there's an opportunity for advice alongside access, absolutely. And hopefully we've learned from the relief for the first round of relief payments and what we can do to better support customers.
Yep.
And so was there anything else you might highlight? So I think you talked about some of the near-term opportunities. What were some of the other things that really stood out that really banks and financial institutions really need to be thinking about in terms of how to support customers?
Yeah, so we specifically looked at digital tools. So, digital interactive tools to help with this, this topic we're speaking about. The results, really, we found the same thing that we always find with digital tools. The more customers use them, the better, number one. And with this issue of advice and financial health guidance, customers who use a digital tool to get help with this issue, satisfaction, net promoter score, acting on the information that you obtained, it all just shoots up sky high. It even shoots up when customers use digital with another channel. So if they went to the branch, let's say, and talked to somebody there and then also used a digital tool, it doesn't shoot up as much, but it goes up meaningfully. It matters. It matters so much. And it was interesting. What we found is that the digital tools that had the strongest relationship with satisfaction improvement, 3 of the 4 of them were kind of lending related. So one was tools that helped me figure out how to finance a home purchase, a remodel, those types of things. How to pay down debt or eliminate debt was another tool that is highly rated. Just generally learning about credit. How do I qualify? How does it work? How much do I think I could get? And the final one was just planning for saving for a large goal or a large purchase. Those 4. And again, this is on top of retirement and investments and a lot of other great things that also help satisfaction. But what I'm telling you is in study, these 4 were on top. The one, bad news for the payments people out there. The one that was lowest, still do it because customers like it. But digital tools that help people sort of track their billings, track their subscriptions, kind of track what's going on with transfers in payments world. Good, but the satisfaction lift was sort of on the lower end of the spectrum. And honestly, when we've looked at this in other parts of our research, it's just tougher. I guess it's just, in the mindset of consumers, they don't really think about payments, right? Payments are payments. It's supposed to happen. It's like the utility that just needs to work. And so they don't really, it just doesn't drive, services around that doesn't seem to drive SAT improvement as much as, around lending or helping with wealth accumulation and things like that. So it probably makes sense.
I know we're getting close to time, if you can believe it already. And I know that we talked a lot about tools, and you've seen an explosion of tools on the market, from fintechs to FIs. It is an important component, as if you've seen in your study, but tools alone without the advice and guidance really, doesn't entirely deliver for customers. So as we think about how we, meet the needs from a tool enablement perspective, how do we make sure that's always paired with really good guidance and relevant advice will really help customers. And so I know we're running, I'm just going to check if there's any questions as we round out our conversation, because I do think tools has been such a hot topic We've seen so many deployed, and I think that's great because it enables consumers to understand where they're at, what they need to do, their current circumstance. And
Yep,
I think
and
I
these
love
tools
that.
are, they really are important because the technology enables these services to be brought to the masses. But we do need to keep them in context, because when consumers receive advice or guidance from a person, they're more likely to act on it. So when it's received in a branch, on the phone, with a licensed rep, certainly their acting on the advice is higher than if they're receiving information through a digital tool. But as we've been, we're in a multi-channel world. These things fit together. So we need to offer everything. It's kind of the way the industry always seems to shake out, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I know, unfortunately, we are already at time. And so we could talk about this topic all day long. I think there's so much depth within this study and so much valuable insight. But I will say to everyone, thank you so much for attending this session and spending a bit of time with us to discuss this topic. We hope that you've taken away some valuable insights and ideas on how you can create solutions and tools at your respective organizations to help advance financial health of your consumers and customers. So thank you again. Thank you, Paul, so much for sharing a bit of the insights. Sure, there's lots of questions on what else is in this study, and I'm sure we'll start to see it as the public releases go out. But thanks for sharing some of the headlines with us today.
Thank you, Jen.